Oddly enough, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's impressive physique was actually one of the biggest problems the VFX teams on Black Adam had to overcome. You see, having such a perfect body doesn't actually mean it's going to look perfect in every shot, and there are actually many reasons as to why this is the case. For example, just because of the way some of the scenes were put together meant they had to modify parts of his body in order for him to look right. In some scenes they had to slim his body down, for others they actually had to bulk it up. And so actually, as you'll find out in this video, what you may not have noticed throughout a lot of this movie is that parts of The Rock's totally unreal body were precisely that, totally unreal. When it comes to superhero movies, VFX teams can normally foresee the type of VFX shots they'll have to do. There'll be digital environments to design and create, and futuristic vehicles to invent. There'll be CG buildings and establishing shots. There'll be full CG shots and digital backgrounds, and there'll be simulations and augmentations. But for Black Adam, in addition to all of this, and the mandatory running on a treadmill shot, the VFX teams knew that a large number of shots would require CGI versions of the villains and superheroes. And to create these assets, they would need 3D scans of all the actors. Fortunately, Weta Digital already had a high-fidelity digital Dwayne Johnson asset, which they had created and used back in 2016 for the movie Central Intelligence, and then used again in Jumanji, and again in 2018 for the movie Rampage, and in Jumanji Next Level, and again in Jungle Cruise. Unfortunately, Dwayne's physique fluctuates quite a bit. For Black Adam, he trained so hard that he actually lost most of his body fat, and so principal photography that ran from April till July 2021, he was extremely lean. However, when the reshoots came around in 2022, Digital Domain realized that his physique during principal photography wasn't the same as it was when Weta had originally scanned him for their asset, so they had to get a new 3D scan of the leaner Dwayne and then retopologize or refit their CG asset to the leaner version of him. Dwayne's weight change wasn't the only problem the visual effects teams had in relation to weight. In fact, the illusion of weight and mass is one of the hardest and most important things to achieve with a visual effect, and if unsuccessful, one of the biggest giveaways that what you're seeing is an effect. Take this scene in Die Another Day, for example. Even though you can clearly see the difference between the live-action footage and the CGI, what actually breaks the effect is the lack of weight when Pierce lands on the wave. You can see it even clearer in the 1997 film Air Force One. Here, the Air Force One asset is actually surprisingly realistic, and the way the aircraft breaks apart is pretty convincing, but the lack of camera movement, impact force, water splashes, debris, and the overall sound design all add to the feeling that the plane weighs less than a real plane does, and therefore cannot be real. In Black Adam, the VFX teams also had this problem of selling weight, but in addition, they also had to sell strength. Black Adam had to appear so powerful that to him everything was lightweight. But even though he could lift a massive rock as though it weighed nothing, it had to look like a feat of strength on Black Adam's part rather than the lack of mass on the rock's part. So they achieved this by using various methods. One was pre-establishing the weight of the object before the effect happens. You can see this in the hoverbike scene where, by using a physical prop on set, they constantly re-establish the hoverbike's weight and mass throughout the sequence. Here, it's a physical prop on set, and then the effect happens. Then again the physical prop on set, and then the effect. And this alternating continues again and again throughout the sequence, helping maintain the illusion that the hoverbike is always real, so that later on when it crashes and then Adam throws it into the air, we still believe it's real, even though in this shot, it's 100% CGI. Another method has to do with Newton's third law. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. When a racket hits a ball, its kinetic energy isn't just clearly transferred from the racket to the ball. The transfer of energy generates different types of actions and reactions within the ball itself that are very difficult to recreate digitally. And even though these reactions happen so quickly and you'd think you can't perceive them, when they aren't present, the effect looks unrealistic. For this reason, the VFX team start an effect by giving the actor something to interact with, so this object can in turn react with them. For example, here the actors are hanging on wires, but Dwayne is actually pulling upwards on them, and he's doing this so that when they are released and fall down, his own hand actually goes up, giving us the impression that he was actually holding their weight. The scene where a powerless Adam had to escape from the prison called for a weaker version of Adam to fight his way out of the secret underwater black site. So for this scene, Adam's body wasn't Dwayne Johnson's, but that of a stand-in actor called Benjamin Patterson. The scene was filmed using phantom cameras running 960 frames a second. While this super slow motion gave the scene a great aesthetic, it also produced a few problems. The first was transferring Dwayne's face onto the stand-in's body. Although Dwayne's face and expressions could be scanned and superimposed onto the stand-in by Lola VFX and their tried and tested egg, the speed and movement of the scene meant that it was an incredibly time-consuming, difficult process, and so they decided to minimize the amount of work they'd have to do by having Teth Adam wear a mask. The second problem was that it's extremely hard to fake a punch in super slow motion, even though for some hits they could fool us by cutting to another camera at the moment of impact, or having something or someone covering the point of impact. If they did it for every hit, it would look staged, kind of like the WWE. So for a lot of hits, the only way they could really sell the shot was to actually make contact. The final and perhaps most surprising problem they had with Dwayne's body was that although it looked big and powerful, just like Black Adam should be, it wasn't really agile, and it wasn't really fast. So for the flight scenes that weren't just straight up and down, rather than have him looking clumsy whilst hanging from a wire, they had to have him lying down on a chest plate, or strapped into a motion-controlled robotic arm that could be programmed to execute any movement the animators wanted, or strapped onto a radio-controlled cart with omnidirectional wheels. And for the fight scenes, they created a clever slow-motion technique and used very quick cuts to give the illusion of speed. And for all you superheroes who've reached the end of this video, here's a little reward. Pierce Brosnan in a mocap suit. Doesn't that look lovely? Support Mr. Green by sending us a super thanks. Just click on the thanks button under the video and choose an amount to donate. This will ensure Mr. Green gets a new banana. He will be happy. Also, we really appreciate every last one of you guys, so stay safe and thanks for watching our video.